So, Steeler Nation, tell me if you heard this one before. It's the second week in a row. The Pittsburgh Steelers are coming off a pretty disappointing loss, and we play a team that we had a huge rivalry with back in the 1970s, a team that has been a thorn in our side. And while I don't hate this particular team to put it like that, I do acknowledge and understand the history and the rivalry between these two because the rivalry between the Steelers and Raiders is very rich. I wish I was old enough to have seen it back in the 1970s, but I acknowledge the rivalry between them. But we're coming off a frustrating loss, and we play a team that we have a lot of rich history against. Have you heard that one before? Well, you should, because it literally just happened last week. And now it's the same case for this week. So let's get on to this game. What's going on, everybody? I'm Mac, back with another video. As always, do me a favor. Like, comment, subscribe, follow on Instagram. Link down in the box below. So, the Pittsburgh Steelers are at the Las Vegas Raiders this Sunday afternoon, if you want to call it Sunday night, on the East Coast time because we're 3 hours ahead of Vegas. Go ahead, because the game, it'll pretty much be dark by halftime, but let's just call it a late Sunday afternoon game. Just call it a West Coast game. Call it whatever you want. But anyway, Steelers and the Raiders, 4:05 kickoff time in Vegas this Sunday. So there's a lot to talk about with this game, so I'm going to try and keep it at a minimum here. I'm going to start off with talking about the Raiders at first. They're 2-3 on the season, and I'm just going to say it. The Raiders are a complete mess. They are one of the worst teams in the NFL, in my opinion, and honestly, their record should be worse than what it is. They're 2-3 on the season, and, you take a look at them, and they needed to come back to beat the Baltimore Ravens a couple weeks ago, rally from a 10-point deficit if John Harbaugh doesn't have his vintage choke job like he usually does in crunch time. Vegas is potentially sitting at 1-4. And then they beat the Browns a couple weeks ago, but Cleveland had a chance in the red zone in that game. But, Deshaun Watson will be Deshaun Watson. So that's the case with that. So Vegas is 2-3, but they honestly could be at worst 0-5 or 1-4 realistically. But, it is what it is. But you take a look at this team right here. And, how could anyone forget that? They got shredded by the Chargers, and then they're the only team that the Carolina Panthers have beaten on the season, got destroyed by Andy Dalton of all quarterbacks, and then just last week they got blown out by the Broncos. But you take a look at this Raiders team, starting off with them offensively, I mean, it all starts with their head coach, Antonio Pierce, when he became their interim coach last year. The Raiders had a little bit of spark for them because it seemed like that they like playing for them. And, it was easy to have some expectations for them this year. But Antonio Pierce has shown that he really is showing some mixed signals and some, what do you want to call it? He's showing that really that Davantae Adams is just not the guy for him. And I'm not going to get too much into Adams on this video because I'll go down the wormhole with it and I don't want to be too long with it. But Antonio Pierce, I really don't know if he should be the guy that Raider fans are hopeful for, But offensively for them, they're run by Luke Getsy as their offensive coordinator. And coincidentally enough, he was Justin Fields' offensive coordinator when he was in Chicago. And it's easy to see why people put a lot of blame on Justin Fields. He was thrown under the bus. He was the scapegoat. But I blame that on Luke Getsy because the Bears had the 28th ranked offense and the 20th ranked offense respectively in Chicago. And currently Oakland. Vegas is 23rd in offense right now. So basically, the Raiders are right in the middle of where they were offensively in 2 seasons in Chicago with Luke Getsy. Basically right in the middle of it. And they're 30th in the rush offense. So with this game right here, I expect them to be pass heavy, but that leads me into the biggest problem with the Raiders right now is that they don't really have a real quarterback solution. I don't even know who's going to be starting Sunday. I assume it's going to be Gardner Minshew, but Gardner Minshew has started the majority of the season, but he got benched against the Broncos last Sunday because he had a bunch of turnovers and just overall just played really bad, you know? So who are the Raiders going to be playing? Who are the Raiders going to be playing at quarterback? The offense in general has just generated a lot of turnovers on the season. And there really isn't a lot of big impact players. And of course, if this was a couple years ago, I'd be sitting down here talking about Josh Jacobs. But even in the games that we did have to go against Josh Jacobs, he was a non-factor for them. We shut him down in the couple of matchups that we went up against Josh Jacobs. And now he's not with Vegas anymore. But other than Jacoby Myers, who is a solid receiver, I don't think he's number 1 tier. I think he's a 3 or 2 at best, but he is a solid receiver. He can find the end zone, and he's capable of, getting touchdowns on the board. And other than him and maybe Brock Bowers going up against the middle, I really don't see any impact players on the Raiders. Their offensive line is very weak. So that leads me into 2 keys to victory right off the bat. My first one is you gotta generate turnovers. If there's one thing that I think every Steeler fan can give a lot of credit to the defense, despite them playing so poorly last Sunday night / early Monday morning, whatever you want to call it. If there's one thing that I will give the defense credit for, we got 3 turnovers on the night, 2 interceptions and a strip sack. This Raider team has turned the ball over a lot this season. So definitely generate turnovers in this game because the Raiders, with their defense, they can't get off the field and the offense can't stay on the field. So tear them down and tire them out as much as you possibly can, and make a guy like Gardner Minshew or Aiden O'Connell or whoever they're starting a quarterback for this game beat you, because that they don't excuse me, they don't really have any sort of confidence with their OC and their scheming behind it. So that's my first key to victory right there, is just generate turnovers and be aggressive off of them too. 7 points off of 3 turnovers on Sunday night against the Cowboys, that's ridiculous. And if the Steelers got just 1 touchdown on another one of those turnovers, we win. Instead, there was a point where the Steelers, I kid you not, we ran the ball 6 straight times, and then on 3rd down, we decided to pass, and then we ended up punting. You call that aggression? And I'm going to get into George Pickens and my thoughts on it a little bit in this video, because I have a whole lot of things that I want to say about that situation right now. So I'm going to separate that into another video, really. But generate turnovers and be aggressive off the turnovers as well. You don't need a Patrick Mahomes or a Tom Brady or an Aaron Rodgers or a Dan Marino or a Drew Brees or a Peyton Manning and so on. You don't need that type of quarterback to be aggressive off of a turnover. If Vegas makes a mistake and it gets you the ball back on defense, take advantage of it and really make it hurt. So that's my first key to victory right there. Second key to victory is the middle of the field. I mentioned with Brock Bowers how he's probably only right there with Jacoby Myers for being their only impact player on defense. Well, guess what? Brock Bowers finds the middle of the field really well, and he does real well with inside linebackers. So my second key to victory here is our linebacking core really needs to step it up right here. Look, I'm not ready to throw in the towel just yet with Patrick Queen, because he's been very underwhelming to start off the season. But guess what, guys? This is week 6. and Patrick Queen still's been relatively quiet. So if he has another quiet game this season, it's going to be a third into the season where Patrick Queen pretty much hasn't done anything aside from racking up tackles when he already gave up when he already gave up some yardage. So if there's any game for Patrick Queen and maybe even Peyton Wilson to step things up and put their name on the board for the Pittsburgh Steelers, I think it's definitely this game right here. They are going to be tested, and they need to be able to step up to the range to a guy like Brock Bowers, because like I said a couple of times already, Brock Bowers against the middle of the field and against inside linebackers, that's trouble for us right there. You got to be able to stop him. So I want to see guys like Patrick Queen and Peyton Wilson get involved and get their flashes of play in this game and really make a difference here. So those are two keys to victory right there that I can say, going into this game. But then you take a look at Vegas defensively. They're not much better. As a matter of fact, I'd say they're even worse defensively. So they're dealing with a ton of injuries, sure, and they really didn't have the best players available at their disposal to begin with, but they're dealing with a ton of injuries. Malcolm Cooney was just put on IR, but then you take a look at guys like Max Crosby, who's probably the best player on that team in general. We all know the type of guy that Max Crosby is. He's a freak in nature. He's a great pass rusher, very physical, very down and dirty type of guy. And him going up against Broderick Jones in this game, it concerns me a little bit because there are moments where Broderick Jones is up on that O-line and he either looks lost or he doesn't know what his assignment is when he's going up against an assignment block right there, because there are times where I'm looking at him and it just seems like he just doesn't know what he's doing. It's like he's either like, hey, is that your guy right there? Or is that my guy? Like he's turning around to the O-line trying to confirm it. And him going up against a guy like Max Crosby, that concerns me right there. So there you go right there with Max Crosby. They don't really have any other big guys on defense aside from guys like maybe Charles Snowden, who went undrafted for him. He's a pretty okay guy. They got Tyree Wilson last year. He's nothing really, nothing much for him. He's just not really a starter. I think he's more than just a depth piece right now. Big blow for them is that they lost Christian Wilkins due to injury, and they placed him on IR as well. But the other guy, aside from Max Crosby, that the Raiders are high on, and a guy that I believe we probably should have given a second chance to, is former Steeler Robert Spillane. He's just a great team leader. He's a great green dot type of guy. And I think him attacking the middle and him going up in coverage like the linebacker that he could be, I think that's a really good acquisition for the Raiders right there. So you got to attack Robert Spillane and you got to make him work as well. Tommy Eichenberg, I think he's going to be opposite of Max Crosby right there. And then the secondary is just nothing huge. It's just a big block of Swiss cheese on the secondary, except for maybe Isaiah Palmalu, who is the nephew of my favorite Steeler ever, Troy Polamalu. So there you go with Vegas. There you go with Vegas right there. You look at them, it's easy to call them a dumpster fire, like I said that they were at the beginning of this video, and they are. They're a very bad team. They don't really have anyone to be fully concerned about. And overall, it's just a franchise that's just absolutely going nowhere. Reset after reset after reset, bad draft after bad draft after bad draft. It's all a reflection of ownership. The Raiders are one of the worst ran franchises in the NFL, and the on-field product shows it. That's what worries me for this game. That's my biggest concern with this game right here. It's because they're so bad. It's because they're so dysfunctional. It's because they're putrid. The Steelers have a knack for either making games like this unnecessarily close or even losing them. How many times in the Mike Tomlin era have the Steelers done this? I mean, they just did it on Sunday night. The only difference is Dallas is just a better team. They're just off to a slow start. You could probably say that they did against Indy the week before. Again, the Colts aren't really a bad team. They're just off to a slow start, too. Last season alone, lost to the 2-10 Cardinals 4 days later on my 28th birthday, no less. Lost at home on Thursday night to the 2-10 Patriots. Losing to two 2-10 teams in less than a week. Disgraceful. How about in 2020? Blown out in Cincinnati on Monday Night Football by the Bengals, who had no momentum whatsoever. They did it God knows how many times in 2018. They lost 3 straight games against the AFC West, including games to Denver and, coincidentally, the Raiders, both on the road, and both those teams were awful that season. That Raider game, by the way, was probably the one game in my fandom that I legit felt like I wanted to punch a hole through my wall. 2017, lost to the Chicago Bears. If you want to say 2016 when we lost in Philly, go ahead, but the Eagles were 2-0 going into that game, and they just finished, and they just had a real bad downturn to close out that season. And I could go on and on and on about this, but the Steelers have I mean, all the times basically that we've lost to the Raiders on the road over the last few decades. Because last year when we beat the Raiders in Vegas, that was our first win against them on the road since 1995. So I don't know what it is with the Steelers and having trouble with the Raiders on the road, but this is a trend that needs to stop right now. Last year, yes, I understand they got the win, but I want a winning streak on the road against these guys. Okay? There's no excuse to lose to them. Because you take a look at us, we're not coming in so healthy either. Cordell Patterson, you can pretty much, he's been ruled out for this game again. And Jaylen Warren, you can pretty much say that he's out for this game as well. I know he's listed as questionable, but has Jaylen Warren done anything at all this season? No. So you can basically say that he's out for this game too. And that brings me into Najee Harris. And look, I've tried to find every leeway possible and every avenue possible to give Najee Harris another chance here. But I'm telling you, if I was the GM of the Steelers or if I was Omar Khan, I'm sitting down here telling you I am not giving him a 5th year. This is back-to-back weeks of Najee doing nothing against 2 of the worst run defenses in the NFL. 19 yards against the Colts, 42 against Indy, or 42 against Dallas. So barely over 60 yards barely over 60 yards on the ground for him in back-to-back weeks against 2 of the worst rush defenses in the league. That is not good. And unfortunately for us, the only good thing that I can really say about Vegas's defense is that they stop the run really well. You know, so if Najee can't do anything against 2 of the worst run defenses in the league, what makes me think that he's going to be a difference for this game? You know, and I understand the offensive line isn't the best, but you take a look at it. Mason McCormick's been pretty solid since being assigned to the right side because James Daniels is out for the season with an Achilles injury. Isaac Seumalo, the only thing that I'll give him benefit of the doubt for is that after he got pancaked, he played well. He played okay after that, and it was his first game back. So that's the thing with Isaac Seumalo. Zach Frazier, keep doing what you're doing. There's no issue with Zach Frazier whatsoever. We have our center right there. And then I already talked about Broderick Jones, and then Dan Moore, the less said, the better. So so there you go with the O-line right there. Basically, I'm saying 2.5 out of the 5 starters on the O-line are above average to good. But that doesn't excuse Najee not being able to find holes when he is getting decent run blocking. The run blocking needs to step it up. And they need to create holes for Najee. And at the same time, Najee needs to find these holes. It was easy to have hope for him in the early parts of his career because he had back-to-back 1,000-yard rush seasons behind an O-line that's so bad. But he just hasn't been working out. And then you take a look at us defensively, it's not much better because Nick Herbig got injured on Sunday night, could barely walk. So there goes our guy behind Alex Highsmith. But, at least Highsmith has a timetable to return. Highsmith is hopeful to play for week 7. Okay? So at the very least, we could just be looking at one more week where we're, crippled on the opposite side of TJ Watt, but that doesn't excuse it. Nick Herbig out for this game. DeMarvin Leal will not play in this game either because he got hurt against the Cowboys as well. So what are we going to do opposite of TJ Watt? Are we looking at probably Isaiah Loudermilk or Jeremiah Moon? I have no idea. Probably Jeremiah Moon because he has more of the experience on the edge. But still, this opposite side of TJ is so thin. It's just a big mark for concern. And the defense in general is really concerning as well because the first 3 weeks, defense did so well keeping opponents off the board, keeping them out of the end zone. Steelers only allowed 16 points total, or 26 points total on defense the first 3 weeks of the season. Basically 8 points a game. And since then, the Steelers have given up 47 points. They've had back-to-back weeks of allowing at least 20 points. 47 points in 2 weeks after that amazing start they got off to defensively. And the defense has especially been bad in coverage. I mean, sure, there have been moments where the defense has been causing pressure, and TJ Watt should have more sacks than he does already. And he did get sack number 100 on the season. But the pressure needs to be consistent. The physicality needs to be there. And I already mentioned it with Patrick Queen and Peyton Wilson. If they're to have big games with us, this needs to be the week to do it. They really need to step up their game here. But the coverage defense has just been very disappointing. Minkah Fitzpatrick has basically been nowhere. JPJ's made a couple of nice plays. He's had the interception, sure, but JPJ's been kind of quiet to start off the season. You see it when Deshaun Elliott's tripping on his own 2 feet in coverage. There's just no communication. There's just no assignments being made, and it's just not working out so far. I mean, we're into week 6, and I'm sitting down here still saying there's no communication on defense. Guys are missing their assignments. And guys are out of position, in my opinion, like Beanie Bishop. He's not a good man-to-man type of guy, which is why I think the Steelers still need to put him in the nickel defense. If you saw Beanie Bishop, he had that terrible holding call against the Cowboys, and he got destroyed in coverage as well. So our coverage defense and our pass defense really needs an improvement right here. And like I said, this should be the week to do it because the Raiders are uncertain of who they even have at quarterback in this game. But that's why this game scares me so much, is because they have like nobody. And how many times have the Steelers made nobodies look like all pros? Way too often. So my final 2 keys to victory are this. It's obviously the same one as last week, okay? For the second week in a row, I'm sitting down here saying, gash the defense part 3. Indy had a terrible defense. Dallas had a crippled defense. And you couldn't take advantage of that. Vegas has no help on defense outside of Max Crosby and Robert Spillane. The defense can't come up with turnovers, and they have no pressure, again, outside of Max Crosby. So the O-line there's no excuse for the O-line to get pressured and to get tossed around all day Sunday this weekend. They need to create the lanes. They need to draw up the right plays. They need to use guys' size like Muth and McDonald. They need to use that to their advantage, like Pickens, and not give him 34 snaps total and rotate him like Tomlin said. Again, I'm going to get more into that in a separate video. But the yak ability needs to be there. The big splash plays need to be there. The impact needs to be there. Everything offensively needs to come to just destroy this Raiders defense right here. That means using Justin Fields' legs. That means good blocking by the O-line. That means using your receivers. That means using all of your weapons. It means attack in the middle of the field. And it means finally getting Najee Harris to having a really good game. That's what I mean. Gash the defense. And lastly, and most importantly, I'm sorry to have to put it like this, but stop coaching like a pussy, because that's what Mike Tomlin is, okay? His game plan always revolves around playing it way too safe and playing it just enough to not lose. Just barely getting by. Like, he coaches well enough for the Steelers to not lose, but he doesn't coach enough for them to really win. That's not a winning pedigree. That's not a winning formula. And like I keep saying, you can plug in whatever quarterback, you can plug in whatever coordinator, you can plug in whatever O-line, whatever receiver, whatever GM. It's not a winning formula and not a winning mentality if you're starting off weak and then turning things up in the second half and doing damage control and or if you do get off to that quick start and you do get off to that strong start and you get conservative and lazy and allow the other team back in the game. That's how chokes happen. You need to be aggressive. How many times have I said this? You need to be aggressive. There is absolutely no excuse in the world to play down to this Raiders team. There is no excuse to have this even be a game. If the Steelers are to blow out one opponent this season, it is the Raiders. And I've said this for 3 weeks now. If there's 1 week to have a blowout win, it's the Colts. If there's 1 week to have a blowout win, it's the Cowboys. Well, here I go. 3rd week in a row. Let's make it a hat trick, why don't you? For the 3rd week in a row, if there's one team to blow out, it's the Raiders. Stop being safe. Let these guys out of their cages. Take the handcuffs off of them and let them run wild. That's what I'm talking about. Okay? So yeah, Steelers, Raiders. Like I said at the beginning, very rich history between the two. Everything from the Immaculate Reception, that's where it all stemmed from. 5 straight years of meeting in the playoffs in the 1970s. And more often than not, the winner of those matchups would go on to win or at least make the Super Bowl. And while the Raiders have been absolutely horrible for the better part of the last 25 years, and the Steelers have been consistently great, the Raiders have still made this a rivalry. From 2006 to 2018, the Raiders won 5 of 7 matchups against us. And we've taken 2 out of the last 3, sure, but for whatever reason, we just always have trouble playing the Raiders, especially in their stadium. So we got to come away with this win. Bottom line, we can't lose 3 in a row after starting off 3-0, because Baltimore's currently 1-3-0 and they have the lead in the division right now. So Steeler Nation, I don't know about you guys, but I'm not confident with this one, even though that there are overwhelming advantages for us in this game. But we need to come out and get this win. All there is to it. Anyway, let me know what you think down in the comments below. I'm Mac, checking on out for the day. Have a good one, everybody.